right. Hi, my name is Lainey Hunter. I'm from Enterbridge Technologies. I'm here with Sidney Madison Prescott, a RPA expert, and someone I'm really interested in getting to know and talk to. So welcome, Sidney. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
So I want to start off, tell us a little bit about your background with RPA. How did you get started? And I'm also really interested in knowing kind of what initiatives you're most proud of.
I always like to joke that I started RPA as a little serendipitous. So I initially started my career in configuration and asset management, and I branched out into kind of data quality and governance. So really understanding different systems, how those systems extract, transform, and load data, and how we can improve the integrity of that data for our business stakeholders. And so I was looking at that world through an engineering lens, and I had an opportunity to run basically a proof of concept for robotic process automation, which is also known as RPA. And in that proof of concept, it was wonderful because I had an opportunity for the first time to understand more kind of about the use cases that could be tackled with the tool, the functionality and the value from a business perspective of RPA, and also how to leverage RPA in I'll say an enterprise environment. So an environment where you have homegrown systems, you have SaaS systems or vendor systems, and it enabled me to really start to understand how powerful and compelling the automation could be. And from there, from that proof of concept, it really just rocketed my career off in that direction. I absolutely enjoyed how versatile not only the tool is, but also how you have to really meld that engineering perspective with the business. So RPA really relies heavily on that true partnership and engagement between the business and technologist, and being able to in essence speak the same language to tackle different business problems and how to automate those problems and gain efficiencies through RPA. And so my career really went from the POC. I started working in bigger, I would say, centers of excellence related to RPA. So helping cross-functional business stakeholders. And that was in Bank of New York Mellon and E-Trade. And then I would say the project or implementation that I'm the proudest of would definitely be Spotify, where I built out and scaled the first RPA or Intelligent Automation Center of Excellence at an enterprise level for the company. I'm definitely proud of that effort, especially it occurred during the pandemic. So that was a whole other thing, working remotely and building an engineering team from scratch and a strategic roadmap for automation from scratch. And we quickly got to a point where we had well over 150 automations in production.
Wow.
So I'm definitely proud of how quickly we were able to scale despite working remotely and building the team from the ground up.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I love what you said about RPA is kind of like this perfect middle ground between, like business logic and these like high tech kind of innovative solutions. I think you make a really interesting point there. So how long was that scale up time that you said at Spotify from kind of ground zero to 150 automations?
That was over the course of 3 years. So, and it started from the team actually building out the team, plotting out kind of quarter over quarter, year over year, what the strategic roadmap would be, not only for the structure of the team, but also the governance around the automations, the ways of working, and then of course building those much needed relationships with our business stakeholders.
Yeah, very cool. And then now you're doing something similar in your new role, I imagine. Are you starting from ground zero again? Is there any sort of structure there?
There is structure, which is nice. So we're not starting from ground zero. We do have an existing RPA program. And what I'm doing is I'm coming in to really look at maturing out the Center of Excellence and growing our skill set internally, as well as the tools and the tooling capability for the business. So we're really looking at less of starting from ground zero, but more of we do have some automation functionality, but how do we take ourselves to the next level? And the next level really isn't just about bringing in shiny new tools. It's really about elevating the value to our business stakeholders that we can produce by kind of growing out our skill set, our tool stack, and our ways of working.
Nice. So I guess for ground zero for some of our viewers, how would you describe robotic process automation to someone who has maybe never heard of it?
Yes, it's very. I'll put it very simply. It is robotic process automation is software, and it can be through numerous external vendor companies, and the software in essence mimics a human's tasks. So in essence, if a human, I'll give you an example, is in a business where they have to log into their computer, they have to go into a specific file drive, they have to pull out an Excel file, and then they have to look at that file, extract some data from that Excel, and type it into another system, and then hit send. You can build out a robotic process automation workflow that will take the same steps. So in essence, being able to log into the computer, being able to go to the correct file path, being able to pull the correct Excel file based on the naming convention, and then being able to, of course, extract that data and send it to whatever repository, or even sending emails. So it really is, I say, a software where you can mimic very rules-based, repetitive, manual human tasks.
Yeah, and it adds a lot of value there too, because then a human doesn't have to do that.
Yes, exactly.
So what do you see, and I guess this is a pretty broad question, so answer it however you want, but what do you see as like the most valuable RPA use case?
Ooh, it really varies depending on the industry that you are in. Typically, I think if I would say for a publicly traded company, leveraging automation in the finance organization or finance department can be very beneficial, specifically from an efficiency standpoint and also from a data quality standpoint. So when you think about all of the processes that we do for publicly traded companies, whether it is accounting, whether it is financial planning and analysis, kind of all of your tax processes, your treasury processes, those processes are very manual. They also are very prone to human error because of the fact that they are manual, but they also are very high risk because we are looking at processes that typically would feed into the company's kind of month-end close financial processes, quarter-end close financial processes, and then that data gets reported out to the street, to Wall Street. So the room for error is very slim, but we're introducing a lot of error because of the fact that it's so manual, it's very time consuming, very tedious. And those are the best types of processes to automate. One, because to your first point, you're lifting that manual, tedious work off of your business stakeholders, which then enables them to work on things that are more value added. So things like analytics on, the outputs of those reports versus kind of pulling and pushing data scraping just to put the report together. Yeah. So you kind of push all of that work over to the robot and have your business stakeholders really just looking at the outputs and analyzing those outputs and then being able to make business recommendations, business decisions to the C-suite based off of that financial data.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess specifically you have, rather extensive experience in the financial services sector. You said you started out at BNY Mellon, right? And have done some work with E-Trade in their automation, that kind of thing. So tell us a little bit more, kind of expanding on your last point about your experience with RPA, specifically in the financial sector, where you found RPA has delivered a lot of ROI, or kind of like the main pain points that you feel like RPA is really good for in that industry.
Yes. So typically there is a bit of a fear of automating processes, again, that are high risk to the company from a kind of reputational risk,
Yeah.
data quality risk. And so you find that in a financial organization, most of the processes are very manual. So, meaning you have a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of data manipulation. Typically, you're also dealing with a lot of different systems that your stakeholders are going to manually and having to either download reports, and then there's a lot of data reconciliation that is being done between different systems in order to produce an output, basically a business output. And the challenge that you find there is the more systems you touch, the more teams, the more individuals that are touching the data, the more likely it is that as that transformation is taking place, there are a lot of different places for error that are also taking place as well. And so then you get into an issue of, can I trust this data output? This is data that we are leveraging to be able to understand, our P&L. Do I trust
This is
what we've put
accurate.
together, right? And the answer is usually a little
Who knows?
yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, with a grain of salt, right? And so the highest value we've seen is really being able to say, let's take that same process, let's re-engineer it in such a way where there are less manual touch points, which then means less likelihood of the data transformation would include issues and errors with the data. So you end up with a process that is more streamlined, more efficient. So it typically takes a shorter amount of time. Again, removing that extra burden of that kind of manual labor away from the team, but it also results in an output that is much more likely to be at a higher level of data quality, which then means that your executives have a higher level of confidence in those outputs that they're kind of reading into to better understand kind of how to dictate the direction of the business moving forward, quarter over quarter, and then even annually as well.
Yeah. Where do you think that fear comes from? So you kind of led with like a lot of people in the financial industry maybe have some fear about turning these processes over to a bot. So if there is so much error in those manual processes, like where do you think like the hesitancy comes from?
It's very interesting. It's almost a double-edged sword. So typically we tend to have a lot of data checkpoints, and those data checkpoints are in theory to be able to double check the work and to make sure it's trying to raise the confidence level of that final output. But we almost, it's kind of cyclical in nature where we're adding
More
additional
checkpoints.
processes,
Yeah.
additional checkpoints, right? To say like, okay, this is all to make to ensure that the output is what we need it to be. But we also tend to forget how much human error each of those checkpoints involves. And so I think the fear comes from wanting for the data to be accurate, for it to be complete, for it to be consistent, and feeling as if the only way that those attributes can be achieved is by double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking the work of the different teams, but forgetting that in the double checking and in all of the manipulation and this team has to check it and this team checks it, and then we're introducing so much room for error. So I think the fear comes from like the room for error and the desire for the output to be as strong from a kind of from an accuracy standpoint as possible. And so we think, well, the only way that we can achieve that accuracy is through human input, when in reality, what we've seen I've seen it across pretty much every single center of excellence that I've worked on, is the accuracy rate drastically improves the more that you automate and the more that you kind of really look at how do I strip away all of those extra manual touch points that we really don't need. Like we put in those touch points because we know that humans make errors. So once you remove the humans from the equation, you have the ability to say like, okay, we are increasing the data quality, basically with each run. And then we can even sample. There's a lot of fear about, well, what if the automation isn't working as it should? What if the automation is producing incorrect outputs? This is where we have that constant kind of checking of the automation to make sure, is it performing as intended? Was it designed as intended? So this is where the whole software lifecycle development comes
Yes,
in, and
yeah.
testing, development, solution design. So we won't get into all that, but in essence, all that entire structured solution lifecycle is designed to ensure that the integrity of the automation. And then once it's in production or once it's released and it's running live, we're checking to make sure, we're doing weekly, daily, monthly checks on the output, just kind of a data sampling to say, is this the anticipated output that we, and then that way it helps us to be able to say, okay, we can trust this. Like we are double checking the output, but we don't have to do that with every single row of data, every single column of data. We can sample it directly from the robot output, and it gives us that sense of trust in our data outputs once we have automated that process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you can also see it in, the results of, you're not getting compliance fines anymore, and you're not, like there's all these like fruitful things that come out of it that can kind of reassure you that the bot is running correctly and as intended. And it's one bot or two or three bots that are doing, like you said, work of multiple teams doing the double checking and that kind of thing. So super interesting. What job roles do you see the most benefit for implementing RPA in the finance industry, like specific like job functions?
I definitely would say accounting. The analysts that are there, that's a huge. I think there's a lot of room for us to kind of make the, I'll say, the responsibilities of the role a little bit more technically savvy, and almost infuse kind of a better understanding of how to process, re-engineer the way that accountants work. So I think that's a huge piece. I have seen actually quite a few articles and studies kind of talking about the rate of burnout for different job roles within finance, and a lot of that burnout does have to do with, again, how manual the processes are, the amount of stress that comes from, again, the fear of the fines and the regulatory risk and the reputational risk that come with individual job responsibility. And automation, I think, would really help to have higher job satisfaction for individuals in those roles. But I also think it helps to attract people to roles that they may not have considered before, because they did not want, to go into a role where they had to do such manual manipulation and calculation and kind of all of those things. So it's almost recreating the job responsibilities in a way that make it more plausible for someone who is a little bit more technically savvy, but still also really interested in being able to produce these really valuable business outputs.
Okay, fascinating. Kind of reimagining, if I were an accountant, reimagining what that actually means, which I guess kind of goes into a lot of, what you talk about on your platform about becoming citizen developers, or kind of figuring out those own personal skills that you can add to your repertoire to make yourself competitive. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, kind of your opinions there, and how you feel like people should get started doing that?
Yes, absolutely. There's a quote, and I don't know, I can't remember where the source is, but it's a quote that says, "Every company is a technology company," and I think, especially now, that couldn't be any more true. We are at almost like an inflection point, I think, as a global society, where there is no facet of business that is not encapsulated by some form of technology. And I think that the workplace of the future and the employee of the future, I believe that we're going to see less of this kind of false dichotomy between, are you a technologist, meaning engineer, developer, or are you a business stakeholder, meaning you're a business analyst, or you may be a people manager. I think we're going to see less of that split, and we're going to see it coming together where we have technologists that are also business subject matter experts and vice versa. We have business subject matter experts that understand technology, that can speak to the engineering aspect of how to improve the value that comes out of their specific function. And I think in wanting to get to that place where there's more synergy between business and technology and less of a divide, it means that every single role, in essence, in a company has to have that level of functionality, which then means as individuals, we all need to figure out, okay, I started out in business, but I know that I need to also learn technology because I'm going to have to work very heavily with my engineering team to devise solutions, or vice versa. I started out as a computer science major. I went in as a developer. I've been building different automations, but it's hard for me to build an automation to, let's say, sort through a tax process if I have no understanding of tax, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we have to start becoming, I would say, more versatile in our skill set as employees, where we kind of blend together technology and business. And citizen development is really a great place to start because it enables anyone who does not consider themselves a technologist to basically upskill, to start from exactly where they are and to say, I am a tax accountant, right? I don't have any understanding of, robotic process automation, but I can learn it. I can start with saying, let me take one simple process that I do today, that I individually do today, and let me see if I can help myself by building a digital assistant, which would be my kind of citizen developer robot. And I think in that way, by almost automating your own, even if it's just a little portion of your own work as a business stakeholder, you start to see the power of automation within your function. And then many times it helps you to also start thinking outside of the box in terms of your team and your organization, to say like, oh, wow, if I'm spending 30 minutes a day on this specific task, and I know that everyone else on my team who's an analyst is also spending 30 minutes, and I can successfully automate even 15 minutes of that 30-minute process, multiply that times the 20 other people on my team that are also doing this process, right? And that's kind of the beauty of citizen development, is it's a lower code way to understand and to execute automation, but you do end up with really great value being produced at scale as more business stakeholders are trained to be citizen developers, and as citizen developers start kind of sharing their automations, sharing knowledge about what works, what doesn't work, kind of from an individual efficiency and automation perspective.
Okay, very cool. So what resources do you recommend for people who maybe want to start in citizen development? Like where would you recommend someone start the journey?
There are a lot of places to start it. I mean, so I have a book. You can get my book. It is Robotic Process Automation, a citizen developer's guide to hyper automation using UiPath Studio X. And the book is really great because we take you through so many different exercises, and they're very simple. They are designed to facilitate a wide variety of business processes, so it doesn't have to be a specific industry. We made them very much industry agnostic to help basically business stakeholders learn what is RPA and how do I become a citizen developer. The other piece, that book was written using UiPath Studio X, and UiPath is I'll say hyper automation RPA plus vendor. And they also have, UiPath has a lot of great, they have an entire academy where you can learn basically development at your own pace, where you can learn kind of more if you just are interested in RPA and you want to learn more. So I definitely would recommend UiPath Academy as well. It's an online platform, and the majority of the training, I believe, is free of charge. So it's a great way to kind of upskill yourself. And it's nice because the industry is growing in terms of RPA. So there's also a lot of, I would say, experts in the field who are now starting to create their own content to help others learn citizen development. And I mean, I've run across it on YouTube, just doing a Google search. So I think there's a large variety of, I think Udemy has courses on RPA now. So there's a wide variety of kind of online content where someone can easily start the journey of learning more about RPA and then eventually learning about building out their own low-code automations.
Very cool. What you mentioned UiPath, like what do you feel like differentiates UiPath versus other RPA platforms? Is UiPath what you've used at every company you've worked for in RPA? Have you tested a bunch of different ones?
I'm the latter. So I've tested a lot of different vendors. I've worked before with not only UiPath, but also with Automation Anywhere, with Blue Prism. There was another company that I believe they were purchased, but Cryon Systems used to be an RPA vendor. And the distinct difference that I have seen working across different vendors is the usability from a business perspective. So I think that the user interface, I would say, of UiPath is more business friendly, which means it's easier for business stakeholders, non-technologists, to either leverage the platform or upskill on the platform. And I think that's so critical when you think about what does automation look like at scale. You don't want to have a team where you're solely dependent on a set core of software developers who are building out automations. In order to really amplify your automation footprint, you need to involve citizen developers, which means involving a lot of stakeholders that may not be as technically savvy as an engineer by trade. And that's the place where I think that UiPath shines, is that it really helps those who are not engineers per se or software developers to be able to understand what the system is doing, interact with the system kind of in a human in the loop way, and really be able to actually understand how the system works and how they can leverage the system to their benefit from a business perspective.
Yeah. So my last question, I think, is if you were talking to a company, whether in financial services or, in any industry that's ready to get started, who wants to do automation, there's no one at their company that knows how to do it. Like, how does a business get started? Like, what are the hurdles that they need to overcome to start implementing RPA?
Great question. I think the first hurdle is going to be kind of back to one of the first points I made. It's definitely, RPA is definitely a initiative that requires both business and technology. So I think your first opportunity would be, who can I partner with as a business stakeholder from a technical perspective to help me to do, a vendor assessment of what is the right RPA vendor to bring in based on our business challenges, to be able to better understand how do we implement this technology in such a way where we don't open up additional risk from a business standpoint in building the automations. What is it going to look like to maintain and support these automations once they are live and running in the environment? And you need kind of that partnership with your engineering or your technology or IT side to really help you to understand potential errors, room for improvement, and even just the initial implementation. And again, being able to manage the tool after you've started building. And then I think the other piece is really understanding that it is truly a journey, an automation journey, and that you have to start from somewhere. You don't, there's also always a misconception that you need to have perfect data and perfect systems. And I'm like, there's not a single company that has perfect data. There's not a single company that has perfect systems. There's not a single company that has perfect business processes. So our goal shouldn't be, oh, we can't start RPA until we have, all these perfect dominoes in a row. It should really be about starting from where you are at as a company. Even if you say we have data quality issues, even if you say we don't really understand our environments, we don't really understand how our systems ingest data, those are great places to start. I always just tell everyone, don't block yourself from starting your automation journey thinking that you have to start from a place of perfection. Most of
get there, like you don't have to be perfect now.
Exa-
Yeah.
exactly. And the programs that I've seen flourish the most and be the most successful are typically the programs that started regardless of what was happening in the environment, the data, the teams. They said, we want to get started. We'll start small, take the lessons learned, and grow and continue to challenge ourselves from an automation standpoint from there.
Yeah, that's a great point. How would you, like, what advice would you give for people who are looking for a vendor? Like, how would you select a partner?
Another good question. Start with understanding the kind of fundamental business problems that you have within your enterprise. I think that's a great place to start. Not every software solution is perfect for every single industry, for every single entity. So you really need to kind of understand, okay, what are the challenges that are unique to our facet of business. And then the next piece is kind of understanding, okay, are there additional challenges that are unique to this organization outside of industry specific? And that really helps you to say, okay, which vendor, for example, if you are in healthcare and you are looking at a lot of kind of sensitive data, personally identical data, you need the ability to say, okay, which software vendor has the strongest security measures, right? Which software vendor has a history of working with PII or PCI data? And is their solution strong enough to again, ensure that we're not opening up additional risk? So I think that kind of assessment and honest evaluation of what are the guardrails that we need to ensure remain in place as a business can help you to identify a vendor that will fit into kind of where you are as a business, but also where you want to go as well. So thinking about, okay, how are we maturing as a business? Where do we see ourselves in 3 to 5 years? And look at that vendor's product roadmap and say, is this going to fit? Is this going to fit kind of the trajectory of how we want to grow, how fast we want to grow, the direction that we're going to take our business in? We're going, if you're going to break out into different verticals, different revenue drivers, does that vendor's product roadmap satisfy kind of what you're looking for? And I know there's always fine tuning, but the biggest question is the vendor's product going to grow with you as a business?
Yeah. Or are they just gonna program you something and leave you hanging out to dry?
Exactly.
Well, thank you
And
so
the
much.
maturity of the vendor.
Oh, go ahead, please finish.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, and the maturity of that vendor's offering also builds into that. So it's great to understand, because a lot of time the vendors can help you with connecting with other clients, other customers who have also tackled similar automation challenges in your industry. So it's really nice to work with a vendor that has kind of a level of expertise, whether it's in a specific region, whether it's in a specific
Yeah.
industry. They can kind of help you understand lessons that have been learned by other clients so that you can potentially avoid running into those as you start to implement automation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. So kind of if I had to summarize it from my last question of how to get started if you're an organization, it's identify your goals, where you're going, pick some small wins that you can, get up and running quickly and see ROI, find, and vet a good partner that's going to collaborate with you and help you grow and grow with you. Is that kind of how you think that flow would go?
Yes, absolutely. And make sure that you kind of remain optimistic and excited about the journey. But also, the biggest thing I always tell everyone is it is definitely a journey. So realize that it's going to be a phased approach, and that over time, again, you build the knowledge, you take the lessons learned, you improve. So it really is a, kind of a continuous learning and improvement cycle that also happens alongside the journey.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We're so honored that you would take some time and chat with us and disperse your expertise, your many years in RPA, and grateful that we had you to talk with today. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.